There is a specific and humbling form of being wrong that arrives for a person who believed they had accurately assessed the cost of a choice before making it and discovers, through the particular education that only genuine living inside the consequence can provide, that the assessment was not simply slightly off but was wrong, in a way that is fundamental and structural, and that no amount of minor revision can correct. Not the ordinary wrongness of having miscalculated something that was always knowable in principle, but that they happened to get wrong in the specific instance, but the deeper wrongness of having failed to perceive something that was never visible from the position they were in when the assessment was made, something that required the specific vantage point of genuine loss, of actually inhabiting the world in which the choice has already been made and its consequences are already fully operational, to become completely and undeniably legible. This person believed they knew what losing you would cost. They may not have framed it to themselves in exactly those terms. People rarely make explicit cost-benefit analyses of the significant choices of their emotional lives, preferring instead the more comfortable fiction of acting from feeling or intuition, or the vague certainty that what they were choosing was right or necessary, or simply what made sense given who they were and what they needed. But beneath whatever framing they used, there was an implicit assessment, an implicit belief that the losing was survivable and manageable, and that the shape of their life on the other side of it would be sufficiently adequate to what they genuinely needed, that the adequacy would eventually feel like enough. The assessment was wrong, not slightly wrong. Wrong in the specific way that the more than they ever expected in the title is describing. Wrong in degree and in quality, and in the specific texture of what the wrongness feels like when you are living inside it, rather than anticipating it from the comfortable position of not yet having to inhabit its reality. Jordan Peterson has written that the most significant mistakes a person makes in their life are rarely the ones they recognized as significant at the time of making them, that the choices with the most enduring consequences tend to arrive disguised as manageable decisions, as choices within the range of what ordinary coping can address, as selections from a set of options that all seem viable from the position of someone who has not yet lived inside each of them. The disguise is what makes the mistake possible. If the full weight of what they were choosing had been visible at the moment of choosing, the choosing would have been different. The full weight was not visible. It required the living inside to become legible. And now that it is legible, now that the more than they ever expected has arrived with its specific and undeniable weight, the living inside it is producing an experience they were entirely unprepared for. Right, I always knew my worth even when they didn't in the comments. If you have been carrying the quiet certainty of what you bring through the period of someone else's insufficient appreciation, the why of the more than expected requires honest examination of what produced the original underestimation, what specifically was missing from their prior understanding of what you represented that made the assessment so thoroughly inadequate to the reality they are now inhabiting. The examination matters not only because it explains where the current experience is coming from, but because it reveals something important about the nature of what you actually are and what your presence in someone's life actually does, that makes the loss of it so consistently more devastating than the person losing it expects. The first source of the underestimation was the specific failure of perception that habituation produces in every person who has been in long proximity to something genuinely valuable. Peterson speaks about the way that the brain's efficiency mechanisms convert the consistently present good into background, not through any conscious decision to devalue what is present, but through the automatic process of attentional reallocation toward what is novel or threatening or urgently demanding, while what is consistently good and reliably available is processed as already known, and therefore not requiring the ongoing expenditure of genuine attention. You are consistently present, consistently yourself, consistently bringing the full and genuine quality of what you are to every encounter without the strategic variation that keeps attention artificially stimulated. And the consistency that was the expression of your genuine character became, in their perception, the evidence that what you brought was simply how things were, rather than how things were because of you, specifically. The underestimation was built on this habituation. The implicit assessment of what your loss would cost was made by someone who was perceiving you through the distorting lens of familiarity, who was evaluating the loss of the category of person you occupied in their life rather than the loss of the specific and irreplaceable person that you are. The category seemed manageable to lose. The person is not manageable to lose. And the discovery of the distance between the category and the person, arriving through the specific experience of finding that the category is available in various forms, while the specific qualities that constituted the actual "you are not available anywhere" is what is producing the more than expected. The second source was the specific overconfidence in their own resilience that people develop through the successful navigation of previous losses. Every person who has lost things before and found that the losing was survivable develops an implicit model of their own capacity to absorb loss, a model that is accurate within the range of losses that have been previously survived, but that has no reliable predictive power for the loss of something that was operating at a genuinely different level than the losses that calibrated the model. They had survived previous losses. They had moved through previous difficulties. The model said this would be survivable too. The model was wrong because the model had never encountered anything at the level of what you were, and therefore had no genuine data about what the losing of something at that level would actually produce. Something specific happened in them recently that broke through the final layer of the underestimation and allowed the full weight of the more than expected to arrive all at once, rather than continuing to accumulate gradually beneath the surface of their managed daily experience. The breaking through is what makes this the starting to of the title, rather than simply the continuing of something that has been happening throughout the period of your absence. There was a before and an after. The before was the period of the managed underestimation, of carrying something that was larger than they had anticipated, but that remained, through the application of the right mechanisms, sufficiently beneath the threshold of full conscious acknowledgement to be navigated without complete disruption of the forward-moving story of being fine. The after is now. The now, in which the threshold has been crossed and the full weight is fully present, and the being fine story has become insufficient to the reality it was supposed to be describing. Peterson speaks about the catalyst moments that break through the defenses of comfortable misperception, the specific experiences that carry enough of the undeniable truth of a situation to defeat the mechanisms of convenient not seeing that are ordinarily sufficient to maintain the story. The catalyst for this person was one of these moments. It arrived in the ordinary course of their life, not through dramatic confrontation or deliberate seeking of the truth that the moment delivered, but through the specific quality of unexpectedness that genuine catalysts always carry, the landing of something with a force that the preparation of ordinary days does not equip a person to absorb. Perhaps it was an experience that made the specific quality of what you brought suddenly and completely visible through the stark contrast of its absence in something that should have been equivalent. Perhaps it was the sight of you genuinely living, genuinely present in your own life, genuinely yourself in a way that broke through the managed and reduced version of you that the comfortable story required for its maintenance, that made the full and vivid reality of the specific person they gave up undeniably present in a way that the story's reduced version had been preventing. Perhaps it was the specific and private experience of a moment when they reached for something that should have been there and found nothing. When the automatic movement toward what your presence had always provided found the full weight of what the absence actually constitutes, rather than the managed version of it that daily routine had been making tolerable. Whatever the specific catalyst, it produced the breaking through, and the breaking through released into full conscious awareness everything that had been accumulating beneath the surface of the managed period. The full weight of the more than expected arriving not gradually but all at once, with the force of something that has been compressed for a long time and is finally expanding back to its natural size. The why of the more than expected also lives in the specific qualities that you brought that are most deeply implicated in the failure of the original assessment. The qualities that are most invisible while they are present and most undeniably specific in their absence. The qualities that do not announce themselves as extraordinary while they are consistently available, because their consistent availability is the very mechanism by which they become ordinary in perception, and that reveal themselves as extraordinary only through the specific experience of reaching for them in their absence and finding that the reaching cannot locate anything that is genuinely equivalent. The first of these qualities is the specific texture of genuine honesty that was yours. Not honesty in the general sense. There are honest people in various forms available in the world, and the loss of one honest person does not leave a person without access to honesty, but the specific quality of your honesty, the particular combination of directness and genuine care, the willingness to say the true thing without the softening that makes the true thing less useful while making it more comfortable to receive, the specific trust in the other person's capacity to handle genuine truth that constitutes one of the most profound forms of respect available in human connection. That specific quality is not easily replaced because it is not a general trait, but the product of specific character formed through specific experience in a specific person, and the irreplaceability of it is becoming clearer with every encounter that offers something adjacent but not equivalent. The second quality is the specific texture of genuine presence that was yours, the experience of being actually in the room with someone, of having another consciousness genuinely directed at the reality of the encounter, rather than at the management of what the encounter produces in them, genuinely receiving what is offered, rather than waiting for the offering to stop, so that the prepared response can be delivered. That quality of genuine presence produced in the connection with you an experience of being genuinely met, of having the full weight of who they are, encounter the full weight of who you are, rather than the comfortable performance of mutual acknowledgement that substitutes for genuine encounter in most human connection. The absence of that quality is producing what the presence was always providing, the specific experience of something genuinely necessary to the quality of interior life that was being provided, without being recognized as provision. The third quality is what Peterson would identify as the summons function of your genuine character, the specific effect that a person of genuine integrity and genuine self-possession has on the people in genuine proximity to them, the way that genuine character calls forward a corresponding genuineness in the people it encounters, the way that the quality of full honest presence makes certain forms of comfortable performance less possible and certain forms of genuine self-expression more available. They were more genuinely themselves in your presence than they are in your absence, not because you required it of them, but because the quality of what you brought made the performed version of themselves feel insufficient in a way it does not feel insufficient in the absence of that quality, and the loss of the environment in which the more genuine version of themselves was accessible is part of what the more than expected is describing. Peterson draws a crucial distinction between the suffering that produces genuine learning and the suffering that simply produces more suffering, between the pain that is engaged with honestly and that becomes the specific curriculum of genuine self-knowledge and genuine change, and the pain that is managed and avoided and processed into something more comfortable without ever doing the transformative work that it was pressing toward. The regret this person is starting to carry is at the threshold of that distinction. It can go in either direction from where it currently is, and which direction it goes will determine whether what they are experiencing becomes the beginning of genuine change, or simply the acute phase of a loss that eventually settles into the chronic form of something carried without being genuinely addressed. The direction toward genuine learning requires specific things of this person that the direction toward managed suffering does not require. It requires the honest examination of what specifically produced the failure that is now being regretted, not the general acknowledgement that things went wrong or that the choice was a mistake, but the specific and uncomfortable accounting of the particular patterns of perception and behavior and choice that constitute the honest story of what happened. It requires sitting with the specific knowledge of what the patterns cost, not the cost to themselves, which is what the regret is most immediately making visible, but the cost to you, which is what genuine accountability demands that they see with equal clarity as their own suffering. And it requires the willingness to let what is seen actually change something. 2. Allow the understanding of what the patterns cost to reorganize the relationship to those patterns in a way that would produce genuinely different behavior if the opportunity for genuinely different behavior presented itself. The regret is starting. The starting is the most important word in the title because it acknowledges honestly that the process is in its early stages, that the more than expected has arrived, but the full reckoning with what the more than expected requires of this person has not yet been completed. The starting is not the finishing. Between the starting and the finishing lies the specific work of genuine, honest self-examination that Peterson identifies as the prerequisite for genuine change. Whether this person does that work, whether the starting becomes the full arriving rather than the beginning of something that is managed back into a more comfortable form before it can complete itself, is the central question of what is currently happening in them. The cow regret is starting to change specific things in how they think and how they perceive and how they move through their daily life. These changes are the downstream expressions of the more than expected, the behavioral and cognitive manifestations of an interior shift that is still in process, but that is already producing effects that are visible to those paying close enough attention. They think about you differently now, not simply more frequently, though the frequency has increased significantly, but with a different quality of attention than was present before the more than expected arrived. The thinking before was the thinking of someone who was managing a loss that was within the range of the manageable. The thinking now is the thinking of someone who is inside something genuinely larger than they prepared for, thinking that returns to specific moments with the specific quality of someone who is revising their understanding of what was happening in those moments in real time, who is seeing in retrospect what was not visible in the original experiencing, who is building through the accumulated revisiting of specific memories a clearer and more honest picture of what was actually present that was not being fully received. They are evaluating other connections differently. The comparative function that genuine loss always produces, the way that absence makes the specific qualities of the absent thing visible through their contrast with what remains, is operating in them now with the specific and slightly devastating clarity of someone who has finally understood what the standard actually is. Every encounter that does not produce what your presence produced is producing additional data about what your presence actually contained. And the accumulation of that data is building toward a comprehension of the specific and particular nature of what was lost, that the original assessment did not contain, and that makes the more than expected more undeniable with every day that the accumulation continues. They are making slightly different choices, small ones, choices that would not be visible to someone who was not paying very close attention, but that represent the downstream expression of an interior shift that is still in process. The choice to not pursue something that the previous version of themselves would have pursued automatically. The choice to spend time differently in ways that feel, though perhaps they cannot yet articulate why, more honest to what actually matters. The choice to be slightly more honest in interactions where the previous version would have defaulted to the comfortable performance. These small choices are the beginning of the behavioral change that genuine reckoning produces when it is allowed to do its work, rather than being managed into something more comfortable. You have not been in suspension during the period that produced and preceded this person's more than expected. This is the crucial truth, that the comfortable framing of these situations consistently obscures in its pull toward a narrative in which the primary action is the other person's developing understanding, and the primary weighting is yours. You have been living, developing, making choices that have shaped who you are now in ways that have nothing to do with this person's trajectory and everything to do with your own genuine engagement with the specific requirements of your own life. Peterson speaks about the responsibility each person carries to take seriously the ongoing development of themselves, to not organize their life as a waiting for something external to determine its direction, but to bring the full weight of their agency to the ongoing question of who they are becoming and what they are choosing to build. You have been doing this. The version of you that exists at this moment, that is present in the world while this person is inside the starting of their more than expected, is the product of that genuine engagement, more developed, more grounded in genuine self-knowledge, more clear about what you bring and what you deserve and what you will and will not accept from the connections that matter to you, more genuinely equipped for genuine encounter than the version that was present at the time of the original loss. The distance between where you were and where you are now is not automatically bridgeable by the starting of their regret. The starting is real, and its direction is genuine, and what it is building toward has the specific quality of something that has been genuinely produced by genuine experience rather than assembled for strategic purposes. But the genuine quality of what they are building toward does not automatically arrive at what actually exists, does not automatically close the distance between where the regret is pointing and where you actually are, between the you that was lost and the you that has developed in the interval. Whether that distance is closable, whether what they eventually bring has sufficient weight and sufficient honesty to reach where you actually are, is the question that the more than expected is still in the process of building toward an answer to. There is something specific this person needs to understand before whatever comes next can be anything other than a repetition of the pattern that produced the loss, and the understanding is not yet complete, which is part of why the title describes a starting rather than an arriving. The understanding they need is not primarily the understanding of what they lost, though that understanding is arriving with the force described throughout this message. The understanding they need, the one that would make what comes next genuinely different rather than differently named, is the understanding of who they were when they were with you, and what specifically about who they were produced the loss. Not the general self-criticism of someone who regrets a choice. The specific honest accounting of the specific patterns, of where the attention went that should have gone to you, of what was offered and what was withheld, and why the withholding happened and what it cost, of the specific ways that the comfortable and the managed and the protected were chosen over the genuine and the present and the reciprocal in the specific moments when the choice was available. That specific accounting is what genuine reckoning requires, and that specific accounting is what would make whatever they eventually offer to you something that has been built on genuine understanding, rather than on the emotional weight of the more than expected, without the honest examination of what produced it. Peterson says that genuine accountability is always specific, that the general acknowledgement of having done wrong is ultimately still a protection of the self from the full cost of genuine seeing, that the specific naming of specific failures is what constitutes the honest reckoning that genuine change requires as its foundation. The more than expected is pressing this person toward that specific accounting, whether the pressing is sufficient to produce the full honesty of the specific naming rather than the more comfortable form of the general acknowledgement that wants the emotional credit of remorse without the full vulnerability of precise self-examination, is the question that this starting will eventually answer. The more than expected carries within it a specific and important instruction for you that is worth naming directly rather than leaving to implication. The instruction is not to organize yourself around the trajectory of their developing regret, not to position your own availability and your own choices in anticipation of wherever their starting eventually arrives. That positioning would be the reproduction of the pattern that the energy of genuine self-development is moving you away from, the pattern of organizing the quality of your presence around someone else's relationship to it, rather than around the genuine requirements of your own developing self. The instruction is to continue doing what you have been doing, taking seriously the full weight of your own ongoing development, bringing the full honest quality of who you are to the connections and the choices that constitute your daily life, maintaining the clarity about what you deserve that genuine self-knowledge provides regardless of whether that clarity is being met with the external recognition it deserves. The version of you that this person's more than expected is pointed toward, the version that their developing understanding of what they lost is reaching back to, is not the only version that exists. It is the version that existed at the time of the loss. The version that exists now is more, and the more is yours. It is not waiting for their regret to grant it permission to be fully itself. Peterson's deepest conviction about what constitutes a genuinely lived life is that it is organized around the ongoing honest engagement with the requirements of genuine development rather than around the management of other people's relationships to you. You have been living that conviction through the period of their developing regret. The living of it is what has produced the more that you are now, and the more that you are now, offered honestly to whatever comes, received with the full discernment of genuine self-knowledge, responded to from the grounded clarity of someone who knows their own worth without requiring external confirmation, is the most powerful thing you bring to this moment. The starting of their regret more than they ever expected is the beginning of a process whose end is not yet written, Not because the outcome is uncertain in the casual sense, but because the outcome depends on choices that are not yet made. Choices this person must make about whether the starting becomes the completing of genuine, honest reckoning, and choices you must make about what you are genuinely available for when what they are building finally arrives in a form that reaches you. Both sets of choices will be made from within the full reality of who each of you has become through everything that has preceded this moment. They're choices from within the specific combination of genuine regret and developing self-knowledge, and the particular courage or its absence that the full reckoning will eventually require. Your choices, from within the genuine self-knowledge and the grounded clarity and the honest understanding of your own worth, and what it requires that you have been developing throughout the interval of their insufficient appreciation and their gradual and then sudden, more than expected. Whatever comes, the foundation of what comes is being laid right now in the genuine quality of what they are discovering and in the genuine quality of who you have become, and foundations that are built on genuine things, on genuine understanding and genuine self-knowledge, and the honest weight of what is actually real, have the specific durability that genuine things always have. They hold under pressure. They do not require revision when reality arrives in its fullness. They produce over time whatever is most genuinely possible between two people who are both, in their different ways, finally taking seriously what genuine presence with another person actually requires. That is, as Peterson would say, where everything that matters always begins, not in the feeling, in the honest reckoning with what the feeling is pointing toward and the willingness to become, through that reckoning, someone who can act from what is most genuinely true rather than from what is most immediately comfortable. The starting is real. What it becomes is still being decided, and the deciding, on both sides, in the full weight of genuine self-knowledge, is the only story that has ever actually mattered.